Hello everyone, and welcome back to Translationborne, the show that's all about the translation of Bloodborne. You may have noticed that our character looks a bit different now, and his stats aren't exactly the same either. That's because I've spent the time between episodes of this series fighting my way through some Chalice dungeons, which you can see in my Chalice chat episodes if you're curious. For now though, we're going to go ahead and get moving because we've got a lot of people we need to talk to. And I see no reason why we shouldn't start with Eileen. How's it going down here in the Tomb of Oedon? Have there been any changes since the last time we talked to one another?
Try to keep your hands clean. Leave the hunting of hunters to me.
Okay, that's exactly what you said last time. I guess not much has changed. But that isn't necessarily going to be the case with everyone. Unlike what we just saw with Eileen, there are in fact a number of new dialogues we can have with the people of Yharnam now that we've defeated Vicar Amelia and the night is truly upon us. So normally in Translationborne, I like to intersperse item descriptions with dialogue and combat as I make my way through new areas, but for the next few episodes we're going to be retracing our footsteps and focusing almost exclusively on NPC interactions. Then, after we've taken the time to check in on everyone, we'll get back to progressing through the game as usual. So now, with that new format in mind, let's catch up with our chapel-dwelling friend. I think the last time we spoke it was before I sent Adella the nun here.
Oh, the hunter. Alive and well at that. Another one you sent made it here safe and sound. This place is a haven now for so many. Thanks to you. I'm overjoyed, really, that you'd even give me the time of day. I don't suppose there's anybody out there worth saving anymore, but you did all you could. And so many owe you so much. Amazing, really. Not because you're a hunter, but because you're you. Makes me think, once dawn breaks, maybe I can just, start over. Makes it easier to bear all of this, you see. You've made life easier. Thank you.
Hey, don't mention it. Happy to help.
If you please, kind hunter, when the night of the hunt passes, suppose we could be friends? Maybe? Now, I know I hardly deserve it, but, well, I had to just ask, you know. Out of line. Yes, perhaps so. But, well, give it a thought. If you wouldn't mind, of course.
Let's both try and stay alive first.
Once the night of the hunt passes, suppose we could be friends? Give it a thought. Well, if you wouldn't mind.
So as usual, the Chapel Dweller has a lot of lines here, but most of them are pretty straightforward. Of course, that's not to say there's nothing worth discussing here. First and foremost, there's the way the game is able to bring out the personality of the speaker, and one of the clearest, most important aspects of this character's speech is his low sense of self-worth. It's something we've seen in his lines time and time again, from how he feels honored that Ariana would even speak to him, to his hesitance about even asking a hunter to tell people that Oedon Chapel is a place of safety. Here again, we can see from what he has to say that he has a distinctly low opinion of himself and his beliefs, especially in his final request for friendship. This, I think, comes through loud and clear in the official translation, and I'm especially fond of the line, "When the night of the hunt passes, suppose we could be friends, maybe?" The way he interrupts himself, drawing out the question, and then throws in that last "maybe" at the end, feels both natural and appropriate. Part of this comes down to the voice acting, but I really think the phrasing is a lot more fitting than my literal version of, "When the night of the hunt is over, do you think we could be friends?" Also, note that in this phrasing there's no real equivalent to that final "maybe," and instead of having the character just say the official version has gone with "suppose." The resultant double questioning, I think, reinforces the sense that the character feels like he's going out on a limb here, asking for the impossible. It's a small change, but one that I think is totally in the spirit of the original, and it comes off to good effect. Likewise, consider one of the lines that arguably involves some of the biggest changes. Makes me think, once dawn breaks, maybe I can just, start over. The words used here are quite different than my more literal translation. The night ending has been changed to dawn breaking, and the idea of the character changing a little has become an attempt to start over instead. Yet the core idea of the guy being inspired to change himself after danger has passed is the same, and the concept of a new start I think matches pretty well with the dawn of a new day. That's not to say there's no difference at all here. In the end, the Japanese does give me more of a sense of someone who's willing to try very hard to maybe change just a bit, as opposed to a character who wants to do their best to turn over a new leaf. But I still think the basic concept works in the English, especially considering the overall impression given by both languages, which I think matches up nicely, with the most important information being preserved and presented naturally in English. But now that we've run all the way back here, I think we should knock on some of these doors and see if these people are still so eager to be blessed with blood.
Oh, a hunter of beasts, are you? Glory be, you know not the value you possess. But more's the pity. The hours of the night are many, and the beasts more than I can count. A veritable hunt unending. Not even death offers solace, and the blood imbibes you. A most frightful fate. Oh my. But I'm willing to do you a kindness. Step lightly round to the right of the Great Cathedral and seek an ancient, shrouded church. The gift of the Godhead will grant you strength. Yes, I'm unquestionably certain.
Well, that's not what I was expecting. Hello?
Not even death offers solace, and the blood imbibes you. Seek you the ancient shrouded church, hidden to the right of the main cathedral. The gift of the Godhead will grant you strength.
Right, okay. Thanks for the tip, I guess. But in all seriousness, this dialogue is set to play no matter what door you knock on after defeating Amelia. Like this one, for instance.
Oh, a hunter of beasts, are you?
And I'm going to skip over this repeated dialogue, but you probably noticed some interesting discrepancies between the official and more literal translations this time around. Still, a lot of these changes I think are in line with a trend towards mysteriousness that we've seen before. Saying, "Glory be, you know not the value you possess," for instance, comes off as a lot more cryptic than, "It's because of all of you that we're saved." Yes, you could interpret, "You know not the value you possess," as, "You can't appreciate how much the work of you and the other hunters means to us, who you keep safe," but that's far from an obvious interpretation. The wording also lends itself towards making the player feel as if this character claims to be speaking from a place of superior knowledge, something that will play into the advice this character then proceeds to give us. So, while my more literal translation is a bit clearer about what it seems like this character is trying to say, that same clarity could arguably also be seen as less effective in this particular instance. Even with this trend toward the cryptic in mind, though, I am somewhat puzzled by the choice of phrasing when it comes to "not even death offers solace, and the blood imbibes you." As you can see from my more literal version, in the Japanese, this character seems to be expressing dismay at the two possible demises our hunter could meet. Either we die, or we drown in blood, which I interpret as a reference to the idea of losing ourselves to the slaughter. Then he offers to share knowledge with us, presumably as a way out of these otherwise inevitable fates. In the official translation, though, while the wording is more evocative, it seems more like a continuation of what's come before, lamenting that the hunt is unending and there's no reprieve. Also, rather than being presented with two possible outcomes, we're seeing two statements about the state of the world. Death doesn't offer solace, and the blood imbibes us. The result, at least as I see it, is not only a move away from clarity, but also a shift in what this character is offering us, though he claims it's something that will give us strength either way. Regardless of how that particular translation choice plays out, though, we're still guided to seek this church hidden away to the right of the Grand Cathedral. Let's see what happens if we follow that advice. Where exactly do we find this gift of the Godhead? Oh. Okay, how does this grant us strength? Oh no.
Oh, Amygdala. Oh, Amygdala. Have mercy on the poor bastard.
So there were two things I wanted to point out briefly about the lines in that cutscene. First, you may have noticed that my literal translation for amygdala was amendoado. This is because the original term is based on the Japanese pronunciation of the Portuguese word for almond, amendoa. I added do at the end for amendoado for two reasons. First, as I understand it, in Portuguese this turns the word into an adjective meaning almond-shaped, and second, because the Japanese term ends in the sound z. The Japanese could simply have been amendo, but instead the term was amendozu. And I suspect that's because in Japanese this was indeed meant to invoke the idea of an almond shape rather than an almond, though of course that's really just speculation on my part. Regardless, I'd like to come back to why I suspect the term almond or almond-shaped was used here when I talk about the translation for the tonsil stone later on. The other thing I wanted to note about that brief set of lines was a subtle discrepancy in the line that's been rendered, "Have mercy on the poor bastard." In the original Japanese, the word otoshigo is being used here, not the more generic insult of yaro that's typically translated into English as bastard. And otoshigo is a term that specifically references an illegitimate child, whereas yaro really doesn't. What's interesting to me about this is that the English phrase, "have mercy on the poor bastard," is put in such a standard way that it's easy not to think of the literal meaning of the term being employed, whereas in the Japanese, I think the usage of the particular word otoshigo calls some special attention to the term, even if in the end the meaning of the two phrases is the same. But now that we've teleported our way back here, let's say hello again to Adella.
Oh, brave hunter, you're alive. Thank you very much.
Hey, it was the least I could do. Glad you're safe.
The town is in disarray, but there are still people here. Together we await the help of the healing church. I cannot begin to express my gratitude to you. The only thing that I can offer is my own lowly blood, if it would suffice.
No thanks.
Forgive me, I should have known better. What would a brave hunter do with lowly blood like mine? Please, forget I even asked.
Well, now that you put it that way...
Ah, brave hunter. What is it? Have you renewed thoughts on this matter?
I'm still gonna say no.
Forgive me. I must cease this nonsense. Forget I ever offered.
Now, you know what? I'm sorry I'm being so indecisive.
Ah, brave hunter. What is it? Have you renewed thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes, of course. Coming close. Now. Take my blood.
Great. Thanks, Adella. Say, do you have any more? That's good stuff.
Brave hunter, please give me a little more time. There are others in need of my blood.
Oh, alright. I understand. I need to analyze your translation anyway. And on that note, probably the most interesting thing to me about these lines is the translation of how Adella speaks when she offers us her blood. Specifically, I'm interested in the usage of the term zokutai in the Japanese, which in the official translation seems to have been taken as a kind of self-deprecation in Adella's lines. It appears to be the basis behind her asking if her own lowly blood would suffice, for example. The term zokutai itself, however, does not necessarily convey that implication. As far as I was able to find, the word has two relevant definitions. One is a way of referring to the laity, or ordinary people who aren't monks or priests, and the other is a term used in poetry for forms that are excessively common or unrefined. Now, the first definition is an interesting one in the context of Bloodborne's world, but there's at least one potentially big problem with it. After all, Adella is part of the Healing Church. We haven't taken a look at it yet, but we've just received an item called Blood of Adella that identifies her in both English and Japanese as a nun of the Healing Church, and she's also wearing the holy shawl that seems to identify those who are a part of the church hierarchy. Taking Zoktai as a reference to Adella herself, then, doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Of course, because we're not very familiar with the structure of the church's hierarchy, she could be using the term to distinguish her position from ones of even greater authority, but that's little more than speculation. The second definition of the term Zoktai I find even more interesting in that I can see two possible ways to interpret it. First, if we take this as a method of referring in a demeaning way to the common form of something, we could potentially extend the idea to the form of blood ministration itself, and that does seem to be the topic at hand. In other words, Adella could be referring to the ritual of blood ministration as a vulgar ritual. Again though, this is reading a lot into something that isn't a form of poetry. Adella could merely be using this term in a more general sense to refer to something unrefined. And if we take this as a reference to her own blood rather than the ritual of blood ministration, then the official translation makes perfect sense. But let's see if anyone's home. Guess you never got blessed with blood? And what happened to that other guy? Okay, I guess I'll just leave you to it then. But anyway, the larger point in regards to Zoktai is that sometimes a single term can present a whole host of potential issues when it comes to translation. Yeah, buddy, I can sympathize. If this is the state you're in now, I'm not sure you'll make it through the night. You could try relocating to Oedon Chapel. I guess not. And though there's more I'd like to go into in Adella's translation, it'll have to wait until next time. Until then, as always, please let me know if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for me as we get started with the series again. Thanks for watching, everyone.